Back to the vaccine rollout. It's slow, isn't it? And also vaccine skepticism, meaning that vaccination rates remaining stuck in the single digits in many emerging markets. We're going to talk about markets for a moment and vaccinations. That is according to data analysis from asset manager Schroders. So what does it actually mean? Well, luckily I have an expert on this who can hopefully speak Gareth to me. He's David Rees, senior emerging market economist from Schroders, joining us this morning. Hello to you, David. Good to have you with us. So let's talk about what this actually means, the status of our vaccine rollout for the emerging market economies. What does it mean at the moment? And I would imagine it will bring a question in what does that mean for future investments?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's quite wide-ranging, actually, within the emerging markets, and the key has been supply. So I think we've all seen that in, particularly in developed markets, you know, there's abundant supply and governments are able to order a huge number of vaccines from a wide number of providers. And really, it's the opposite in emerging markets. So very few governments have been able to secure or easily secure enough orders of vaccines to vaccinate, you know, all of their population. And delivery has been very slow. So, you know, there are some emerging markets that are relative success stories. So in Chile, in Central Europe, for example, vaccination rates, probably about half of the population have had at least one dose of a vaccine. Yeah. In China, you know, the vaccination rates picking up very quickly. But in a lot of other emerging markets, particularly across Asia, across Africa, vaccination is very, very slow. And at these rates, you know, it would take a couple of years or more to vaccinate at least 2/3 of the population. So, you know, at the moment, we really need things to pick up.
So this could have devastating effects, not just, of course, on the health of the population in the country, but economically as well. So help me understand what the markets will look for in something like this, David. So yesterday there were 100,000 people vaccinated here in South Africa, but that was a bit of a spike. It's not happening every day. We've got a very slow vaccine rollout, as you know. So if we see these spikes every now and then, as we're getting more and more vaccines in, will the market be lenient towards us, or does the market not look at factors like slow delivery into the country of vaccines?
Well, obviously, it's very complicated thinking about financial markets, but in some of the work that we've done, it does seem that when countries like South Africa, like Brazil, for example, have suffered, you know, new waves of outbreaks of COVID, that on a relative basis, the markets have started to underperform a little bit. Of course, you know, the markets have still gone up. For example, equities have still risen, but compared to the rest of the emerging world, where there have been new waves, you've typically seen the markets start to underperform. And actually, we're starting to see that on a relative basis in South Africa. So if South Africa is able to get on top of this current wave of infections and it's able to start rolling out vaccines, then the markets are likely to start to respond relatively well to that. So it would be a positive if it starts to happen.
Yeah. Can we talk about relativity for a moment, David? If you compare South Africa, you compare us to some of the other emerging markets, same sort of LSM, same sort of financial status, same kind of economy. Who would we be compared to as far as financial markets are concerned? If they say that we're not doing very well, but if we were to be on the same level par as, for example, Brazil or another African country, is there a marker that we can aim at?
I think really it would usually be Brazil because, you know, parts of the BRICS complex of larger emerging markets, both commodity exporters, you know, and particularly metals and things. So the comparisons are usually made there, and the sort of makeup of the economies is similar.
And when it comes to the financial markets and the reports we start seeing from ratings agencies, I'm not an economist at all, but whenever we talk about investments, future investments and markets, we always panic a little bit in South Africa and we go, well, when is Moody's going to come out and start dropping ratings? Does this have, David, in Economics 101, could this have an effect on our ratings as a country going forward?
It could do. You know, the concern is that if economies are closed down for a very long period of time because of COVID or because of any other reason, that it can damage the public finances. It can lead to higher rates of debt, which of course is always a red flag to the ratings agencies and usually leads to downgrades. So it can be a concern. You know, the longer this goes on, the greater the risk that it could have an impact on ratings. But I think for the time being, the fact that commodity prices are quite high, the public finances in South Africa have actually been turning out a bit better than had been expected, which probably relieves pressure on the ratings for the time being, certainly compared to COVID. I would have thought the bigger force at the moment is the kind of better revenues outlook.
Yeah, no, I think many people would agree with you. David Rees, appreciate your time speaking to a senior emerging markets economist at Schroders, all the way over in London, taking time to speak to us this morning. So the lack of vaccine rollout could have an impact on the economy from a market perspective down the road. It just keeps coming, doesn't it? Oh, let's take you to one of the biggest stories over the